What's up YouTube, and welcome to another Infinite Painter tutorial where today we're going to paint some clouds together. As always, there's links to everything you're going to need in the description down below. There is the palette actual file if you want to use that in today's design, or you can use the palette image that I normally provide. I'll show you instructions on how you can do that and integrate it into Infinite Painter. With this type of design, it's a process. You build up your dark tones here at the back, you then bring them into the shadows even more, and then you start to bring your way through the design and introduce some interesting concepts with your lighting. So take your time to enjoy the process. It really is, as I say, a process. And when you're done, make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram, Facebook, or anywhere else you decide to share them. And if you'd like to, you can actually support the channel and the work that I do here by becoming a member of the channel. You get early access to these tutorials and a loyalty badge beside your name that grows over time. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Enjoy the process and let's get started. So once you've created your canvas, got a big, beautiful canvas, it's just my screen size. What we're going to go ahead and do is you're going to be able to see that I've got the Sky Clouds palette. So for you, you just want to go to this tab here, scroll down, hit the plus. And if you are going to, you can insert the actual palette file. So you can hit the plus and go to your files and insert it into here. If you're going to go ahead and do the tutorial today based off how I normally do it, where I provide you with a screenshot, I will screenshot this as you can see it here. And to do that, if you want to insert it how we normally do, just go up to your three dots as always, import, find the photo, and then come back and it will say here, do you want to insert it as a layer or reference? Select reference. And of course, make sure then in settings, that your settings, if you go all the way to the bottom, that the option for a long press gesture, if I can find it, long press gesture is set to eyedropper. And then that way you'll be able to hold down and select the color from the canvas. Now the first thing we want to do is do our background. So we're going to go ahead and go up to our tools. We're going to go to gradient. We're going to just drag down bottom left to bottom right. And this gradient consists of a couple of colors. If we tap on the dot, if we go ahead and go into our sky clouds, we want to select this color here as the one in the top left. So that's what I've got there. The middle color here, I've added another dot. So if you tap on a line, you can add another dot. And if I tap on that dot, we're going to go ahead and add in the color for that. And that is going to be this one here. And the color in the bottom right, if you tap on that color dot, and again, you go to the palette, it's this one here in the bottom right. So we've got our gradient and we can bring that in a little bit more, make it a little bit darker in that top corner. And we've got a lovely little sun down in the bottom right. I'm going to push that right into the corner though. And hit the tick when you're done. Now it's really important that you hit the tick here on your gradient, but you create a new layer. We're going to go ahead and add in our clouds. Our brush of choice is going to be the option under paint, and it's going to be the fine blender brush. And we're going to make sure that we have our palette. So if we go to our colors, you've got the Sky Clouds palette here. Not going to need any other colors. So what we're going to do is we're going to set our brush size to something nice and large to start with, around about sort of 160, 170. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here. It is the fourth color in that middle row. And we're going to start off with some really nice big dark clouds. So we're going to start off at the very top here, circular motion. Be nice and brave with your application of color. Squiggle it around. You'll notice that the longer you hold down and start to squiggle, you'll get this kind of smudging effect. So we're going to introduce some color into here, wiggle that around. And I've got pressure sensitivity here with the XP pen and the magic drawing pad. Again, there's a link to it in the description down below if you're interested in grabbing yourself one. It's got pressure sensitivity. If you don't have pressure sensitivity, you can always go ahead and bring the opacity and flow down and then build up the color one by one. You don't want to kind of sort of go too heavy too quickly. You do want to have a level of kind of smudging, etc. We're going to introduce some large clouds at the very top. So our design is split up into levels. We've got a line here, and then those gaps between the lines get really, really small. And that's where you put your clouds. So these clouds here are right in front of us, or right above us, should I say, and these ones are on the horizon in the distance. So we want to kind of build up that level of cloud, allowing our design to nicely have some, level to it and depth to it. So we're chucking in some color here. Don't be afraid to just chuck some and dash some in and create rounded fluffy shapes here and there. And then we'll go right up into the corner and I'm flicking the pen around just to try and get some whips and curls in the cloud. That'll look great, help us out later. And then we'll go ahead and we'll bring the brush size down. We'll bring it down to around about sort of 100 mark now. And we're going to introduce some slightly smaller clouds here in the middle ground of our design. I tend to do like one cloud to start with, like with one long motion, and then we'll try and kind of flush it out a little bit more. So we'll just add in like a large shape to get started with, and then build it out from there. So again, these ones are a little bit smaller, and we're trying to make sure we get a little bit of that kind of underside of the cloud. We want to be able to light it from underneath, and just curling that around a little, couple of flicks up on there. That looks lovely. That's a nice big cloud to be working with. We can go ahead and add some over here too. Nice random wispy smaller ones on their own will look great. You can really fluff them out and really add some good depth to it. Over here we'll have a stray one on its own, so we'll sort of wisp this one in here, and maybe we round this off a little bit as well. Again, we want a bit of that underside so we can nicely light it accordingly, and then wiggle your pen around just to try and add in some nice big tone up in there. Lovely big cloud, that one. Excellent. Now we are going to be building in lots more tones, so these are our foundations, it's our blueprint. Let's bring the brush size down to around about sort of 70 now, and we'll introduce another cloud over here, getting slightly smaller. So we want them to, in scale, obviously get smaller, but also, you know, not try to compete with the ones above it for size. So you don't want to sort of make them too big across your screen. You can also grab your smudge tool, and if you tap on your smudge tool and set it to the fine blender as well, you can always go ahead and start to smudge out your clouds if you want to, and really kind of drag them out so you get that nice wispy look to it. So if your application of sort of color isn't quite going right, you can always again grab that smudge tool, get into there, wiggle that color around, push it across. You know, don't be afraid to do something drastic as well, you know, like make them a bit bolder by pushing inwards and then just whipping that color across the sky. You can do that for all of these as well. So you can get into here, smudge them out. Again, it's your blueprint, you're laying down the foundations for the entirety of this tutorial. So you want to spend some time getting these ones a little bit more correct, and as you to a point where you're happy with your sky. I'm smudging across here. We have got another level of smaller clouds to introduce, but for a minute this will be fine. I'm going to bring this cloud really low down and quite close to this one. I kind of like that. It's got like a nice layering to it then. Don't be afraid to, even though it's a large cloud, you know, wisp this one around too. And you can break down some of those rounded shapes a bit more. They've got lovely little drag offs as well. They look great. Let's then bring the brush size down. Let's bring the brush size down. Let's go down to around about sort of a 30 mark. And we're going to introduce some quite small clouds a little bit further back. Notice how I've got uneven gaps between my clouds, of course, because the sky doesn't want to be too consistent. We don't want it to have a similar gap between every cloud. Clouds are separated naturally and randomly, and we want to just make sure we replicate that. A little bit of a cloud there. Let's maybe create like a tiny little break off cloud on its own there, and let's maybe do another one, just a tiny bit just down here, and then push it across. Again, go to your smudge tool if you want, same brush, fine blender, and just push it around and see what you can come up with. You may end up creating something really exciting by just randomly smudging and pushing stuff, and interesting little shapes in your sky. Also, that little bit of wispiness on the side and the edge and the fluffiness of it, to me, makes these clouds look even better because they have that kind of more natural, softer look to them. Excellent. Let's go ahead then and start to move into some of the darker tones. So we're going to go back to our paintbrush. We're going to go to our colors. We are going to go ahead, and we do have some blues that we can introduce later on, but we're going to leave that for a moment. So let's get into some of sort of the darker tones. I'm going to grab this tone here. It's the middle of that first column. And on the back end of some of your clouds now, get really nice and bold and chuck some color in. Okay, again, we're building up our foundations. You can make the brush size a bit bigger again. Let's go up to around about sort of 80 for these larger clouds up here. Smudging in some dark tone, more towards the rear. So the light source is down here, of course, it's shining this way. That's going to be the front end, which is going to be down here, and the rear end, right up here at the very back, is going to be where you want to sort of start to plot in some of your darker tones. You can be really brave and go larger brush sizes and less sort of dragging and smudging, but more bold with your application of the color and chucking it up in there. Let's get some in here too. We do want to have a blend, mind you, in terms of sort of small size, large size in terms of these colors. So you don't want to kind of go too mad with the larger size because we can introduce some smaller ones for extra detail. Now these sort of darker tones are not just for the very top edge, they're for everywhere else as well. So you can introduce some in these clouds here, little dashes. You can always go back to your smudge tool again and really blend these all together if you wish, and again see what kind of shapes you come up with. And you can go right down towards the bottom edge as well. You don't have to just add it at the very back. You can go right down to the very bottom edge like I've done here, and they do look good like that. And you can add in the color, and then in a minute when we layer the highlight, they'll look really good and they'll have a good amount of contrast to them. Introduce some down here too. As we get a little bit smaller, we want to bring the brush size down. I've gone down to around about 30 now. Just wiggling that pen along some of the edges down there and around, and also on the back end as well, some of the cloud on the back end, just little dashes and dots down here. A couple of dashes and dots will look fine because it's so far back. And then here, got a smaller brush size now, don't I? So I can go back up into my larger brushes and the strokes for the clouds, and just add in a few more sort of details, almost little sort of random areas of darkness. We don't want to over detail it too quickly, but we will, we can spend some time. But as I mentioned, this is kind of your blueprint for the whole design. So what you're doing right now itemizes where the shadows go, where the highlights go, where everything else should live. So let's go ahead and wiggle our pen along here. A couple of wiggles like so. Adding in some in there. Excellent. Let's add some in here too. You can get really lost in this type of design. It's a bit different to my typical kind of tutorials. You can spend as long as you like adding in wispy details, and I really urge you to get lost in it for as long as you can. Come back to it. Don't sort of upload it to Instagram straight away. Spend some time seeing what you can introduce in here, and that's a little bit different. And you'll come back to it and go, oh no, I need a bit more color here. I definitely need a bit more on that one, or something like that. And they're the best feelings because you gave yourself time to resolve things and see what you can recreate or change in your work. Lovely. So we've got some nice dark tones there, starting to build that up. Let's go ahead and go to our colors again. Let's grab this darkest tone now, the fifth color in the palette, and go back to a large brush size, again about sort of 70, if not larger, to be honest, with these big ones at the top. Let's go up to about 90, and let's get some much needed darker tone up in these clouds up here. Go right off to the edge of your canvas as well. The design doesn't stop, the sky doesn't stop just because our canvas has. You can go right down towards the bottom of your clouds and sort of fluff that color in like so. Again, that gives you something really nice to work with in a moment with your highlights. Just adding in some lovely tone. I'm going to be brave and chuck some large amount of color right up there, right against the edge of the canvas, right up into the corner as well. That gives you some nice darkness. And again, these clouds are almost over the top of us, so what we're seeing kind of the underside of them. So there's going to be loads and loads of sort of ridges and curls and twists and layers to the cloud as we chuck in all the color here. Just dashing away, trying to be brave, trying to add in dashes and dots and wiggle the pen here and there and see what we can come up with. That looks quite nice though. It's got a really nice dark vibe to it. I want to definitely make sure though there are some quite hefty areas of darkness in that cloud. Lovely. That's got some real, that's packed full of rain, that one. Packed full of rain. Lovely. Again, we can always go to our smudge tool. Let's go ahead and smudge that in, maybe wisp that up a tiny bit, take away a little bit of its harshness of a shape, and see if we want to blend it in. Blending with clouds is usually a very good thing to do, but it's also something you have to be sparing with. You don't want to blend too much. So I've got the smudge tool now, by the way, if you're interested. I am smudging as we go now, just to try and, you want to keep some sort of structure, but you don't want to sort of smudge everything too much. So we've got that there. Let's go ahead and bring the brush size down. Let's go down to about 60, and let's introduce some darker tone in some of these clouds here, wisping it. Sometimes it's one long motion, and then I'll let go, and then I'll chuck some more in and see how we can start to layer the darker tone in the cloud. Lovely. I love it when a random wiggle or dash of color comes together really nicely, because there's so much that we can do, but sometimes you get a really nice accident and you're like, okay, that looks pretty cool, I'll leave that. Awesome. Let's undo that last little stroke over the top. Let's try and see if we can add in a little bit back here. I don't want the clouds that are small strays to necessarily have too much color to them, but just a little something maybe will look quite nice. And then these ones down here, yeah, let's introduce some color here too. Now the left side of our design is looking a little bit too blue for me, so in a minute we're going to go ahead and tone that down. It was part of the design anyway, but we're going to smudge it first before we get into that process. So I'm just going to sort of blend in a tiny bit more. I'm pretty happy with the application of some of those dark tones. Look at these big whippy clouds up there. They look cool. And then let's make the brush a little bit smaller. Let's go, down to a much smaller brush size, probably around about 20, and add in some back here. So we're really zoomed in like so. And one thing you can do with your when you're doing a cloud work design is do this. Crush it right down to this really small size. That's where you get an idea for the general structure of your whole work, and then from there you can go ahead and see, okay, am I doing the right thing or the wrong thing? Now at this point, with this smaller brush size here with some dark tone, don't be afraid to also introduce, detailed area of shadow and squiggles and wiggles. You can add in some areas there, and don't be afraid then to grab your smudge tool, make the smudge tool nice and small too, probably around about 30 as well, and then just get in there and wisp them up, smudge them in, see what you can come up with, see how much detail you're happy to commit to. Obviously I've got a tutorial to make, so the duration of this video shouldn't be a sort of representation of how long this should take. Take as long as you want to, like I said earlier. Lovely. Let's get in there with some lovely detailed lines, and we'll grab our smudge tool in a minute, smudge them all together. Interesting application of color. I'm going to grab my smudge tool while I've got these kind of interesting kind of bold shapes, because maybe they'll encourage me to do something different. So let's go into there, wiggle that around, circular motions with your smudge tool, circular motions, wiggling that around. Let's add some brush stroke again to the underside maybe. And sometimes it's just about wiggles and dashes and scrapes and everything, and every other word you can think of for that type of thing. It's just random application of color. This area here now, I'm just trying to detail it a little bit more by just grabbing my smudge tool again and then wiggling it all together, because it looked a little bit sort of too empty in the middle of the cloud. Let's go to this one over here now, introduce some lovely detail on there too. Clouds are very therapeutic for me. I really love drawing them. You can get lost in it, really lost in it. I end up sort of walking away from it a bit dazed sometimes, because your mind has just been sort of really focused for so long on the concept, and then seeing the final result, it's awesome stuff. Now these large clouds, I'm going to leave them. I don't want to sort of over detail those ones. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and darken up this top left area a little bit more. So we're going to create a new layer in front of your clouds. I've changed my brush to the option of sprayers and the soft brush, and with the same color, the size is set to around about 700. Now I've got pressure sensitivity. If you don't, you will have to factor this in, but very lightly, top left, just kind of go over the top of your design, just trying to darken up this left area of our design a bit more and try and add in a bit more contrast across the sky. We're going to merge this together, so what you do now will somewhat be permanent. So now when you're done, just tap on the layer and merge it down, and now it's onto one layer. Now at this point, we can actually go ahead and start to introduce lighting and highlights and shadows. So we can go ahead and on the same layer, we're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and introduce the orange tone here. So it is the fourth color in the palette. We want to go back to our brush and back to the option of paint and the fine blender brush again. We're going to set the brush size though to something a little bit larger to start with, because we're going to work up at the top. So we're going to go up to 80, and we're going to introduce where we think that lighting is coming from. Now the lighting of course is here. Lighting beams go like this. So you need to make a decision what clouds are going to get lighting and which ones are not. You could primarily say here, 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 not there. That's going to be left. You might add the faintest bit there, but not a lot. If anything, I'm probably going to leave it just for sort of a dramatic kind of look. So let's undo all of those basic lines. Let's zoom in on our clouds, and towards the right side here, we're going to introduce some color. Now I'm pressing really lightly to just dash in some orange on the underside here, and little dashes and scrapes and wiggles and whatnot. And then you can sort of make the decision, do you need to lower your opacity and flow just so that you can be in more control of it. So let's bring that down again. I'm going to go down to about 56. I'm going to bring the opacity down just a little bit to about 80. I'm going to wiggle my pen. That's just a personal preference, by the way. You don't need to necessarily do that. Add in a couple of areas here. I'm just trying to work out where I think the lighting's going to catch, and also can I introduce like random little dashes and dots here and there that kind of tell me there's a random little bit of cloud just sticking out that goes a little bit of light like this, just a tiny bit, and then maybe even another one like there. You're laying out your blueprint for your highlights. And then we're going to make our brush size probably a little bit smaller. Let's go down to about 37, and let's just wiggle some other areas. You don't want to do too much. You don't want to sort of wiggle the light in there too much and too rounded. That shape there was a little bit too rounded, so we'll just reel that in a tiny bit. Sometimes it's very obvious and easy to get carried away in these things, so it's just a matter of just taking a look, see if you can bring it back into line just a little bit more. So a couple of these random little dots, etc., will look fantastic. Now again, it's then up to you to move on to the next area. Wiggle your pen along the edge and see where you can introduce the basic start of some of your lovely fluffy areas of cloud. And maybe maybe you can reinvent the shape a tiny bit more and bring in some new life to it. Like it overlaps that one in the distance. Maybe there's a little bit that trickles back there and a tiny bit up towards the top, but we're just laying in that foundation. We'll smudge them probably in a second, but for now, we're just laying in that basic. Now I'm keeping it really, really light because I don't want to introduce too much too quickly. I don't want it to be like this. You definitely don't want it like that. You want to start off really, 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 really light, build in all the tone. So as I keep saying, lower the opacity if you need to, based on your equipment and your experience and what you like to do, and pressure in general. Lovely. That's got some nice tone on it. Let's go ahead and introduce some on here. Probably just more so on this right hand side, wiggles and squiggles along there. That's probably all I need really on that area. I can definitely focus more of the lighting on these areas here. Definitely a lot closer to the sun, absolutely bathed in the sun. Look at that. Lovely, lovely big sort of bright area there. And we'll do the same under here again, but we'll just try and expand the cloud a little bit more now and try and introduce some areas here. Loads and loads of lighting on this one, and maybe a little bit more along here too. Definitely want to get the smudge tool involved in this too. So before we move on, let's definitely do that. Let's go to our smudge tool. Make sure the smudge tool is set to, I've got it set to 26. I think we could probably go up to about 38 on that now. And just sort of smudge that in, especially at the bottom, wisp it up again a tiny bit. Smudge in those dark tones and smudge the light tone over towards the shadow. So like a bit of both, you're mixing them together nicely like so. Lovely stuff. Over here, I'm not sure how much we need to do on this edge, to be honest. This one's looking quite nice and sharp, so I'm really pleased with how that one looks. So I don't need to do too much editing on this one. Likewise here too. But at the top here, we can definitely go ahead and, for example, these ones here towards the back, I'm going to bring the shadow down and meet that bright line. So you end up with just the line and the edge of like a rounded shape with some lighting. So sometimes you can bring the darker tone down and bring it towards your line there, just to leave just the edge, just a tiny bit of lighting on that edge there. And that gives us that lovely effect where we can tell there's a shape there and it's being outlined by the sun, but it's just a little bit thinner and smaller compared to the rest. So let's push in some dark tone here. We can wisp it up at the bottom though and push the color around. Here, maybe we want to keep a little bit of the larger tones and the larger shapes here. So yes, we can push in some dark tone like in behind there, for example, but maybe we do want to sort of leave a lot of this color back here, or just have a nice balance, and a good balance between them will look great. Circular motions, just smudging them around a bit. Wisp up the bottom. That last one was a bit rogue. We'll undo that and wiggle that across there. And then likewise, push these down, pushing down towards the line. So I'm pushing down towards where that light source is coming from to create these thin trails in the cloud work here. And then pushing that off. Lovely. Lovely little bit of cloud work that's coming together nicely. And again, once you settle your blueprint down, you've got more colors that we can build on top still, more highlight as well. So it will all come together. Now, one thing I also want to do is I want to go back to my brush and set the opacity down to around about sort of 30–40% and the flow as well. And with what brush size have we still got? We've got a brush size of 34. Okay, that's not a problem. We want to just run some streaks through our sky here. Run some streaks in here, not necessarily off of the end of some of these clouds, but they're just like, especially down here at the bottom, they're like clouds in the distance that we can't quite see. So they're really, really thin, like hazy lines almost. And you can go even smaller, down to like a 15% here, and create some really thin dashes and scrapes, just imperfections in that skyline that are a lot further back. They're very, very faint, as you can see. And then go ahead and make the brush size a bit bigger, maybe about 50%. And just in the gaps, as they start to make their way a little bit higher, we can introduce some more streaking in here and vary up the sky, adding in some interesting tone and variation and lighting. Skies can be fairly messy from time to time as well. Now we're going to go ahead and introduce some yellowy tones now. So we'll go ahead and go to our color. We'll grab the yellow, the third color in the palette. We'll bring that brush size down to around about 30, and we'll make sure that the opacity and flow are back up again. Again, do the same sort of procedure you need to do as last time. And we're going to work out where we want to add our yellows to now. So I'm going to wiggle that in here. Definitely going to add in some sort of dashes of it here, and we can smudge, of course, afterwards. And just a little bit on this cloud here, giving some really nice bright edge to it. A little bit on this one too. Push that out as well, adding in a bit of a yellow sort of streak as well in the sky will look nice. We'll add some onto this one, probably a bit more sparingly, nothing too intense. And again, we don't want our color to be too bright too quickly here, because again, we have basically one layer right at the very end that's going to bring all of this together. Now it's up to you how far you want it to go back. Do you want to sort of wiggle it up into some of these areas here and a couple of squiggles and keep it to a minimum? Again, work out where clouds are probably going to block lighting, so therefore you don't need to add any in. Again, go to your smudge tool when you're done, because that's as simple as this yellow stage is. We just smudge that in, wisp them together. Maybe leave some of them a bit more defined if you want to. Smudging them together. Getting rid of some of the yellow. Also, just blending it nicely into the rest of it. Smudging it in. Lovely. Just a couple of edges there. Just looks so good. Keeping it to a minimum sometimes is the biggest trick with art in general. It's just giving the general impression of something and nothing too intense. You don't need to do absolutely everywhere. Now here, for example, I could abide by that rule a little bit more by just bringing in some darkness here and kind of separating these clouds and creating a lovely big dark spot that makes its way all the way to the very edge of the cloud. And then that helps me create some more rounding effects. And again, a bit more of that natural randomness of clouds in general. So let's maybe try and smudge in a bit of the purple back there too, and break that down as well. Bring that dark tone up and around. Lovely. Just sometimes you want to kind of take away a bit of your work, really. Less will be more, as they always say, and you end up with some beautiful clouds. Now at this point, we're going to go to our color. So we're going to go ahead and go back to our brush, change our color. We're going to grab this color here in the top left of the palette, this first color. Now we're going to introduce some lighting, but in the shadowed areas, but really, really sparingly. So let's bring that right down to around about 50%. Flow can go up to about 60, that's fine. And then we're going to look for some of these clouds here, and can we just very, very lightly in some of your rounded shapes, just introduce some lighting. And I mean really light, that's too bright. We're looking to introduce some like white edge almost to some of these clouds and little specks here and there, keeping it super, super light back there, but just enough to kind of round off a shape almost, you know, just give something a little bit of a rounding look to it. You know, a little bit back here maybe as well on this one that we've not necessarily given too much love to, but we can just round it off a tiny bit, but not with something too like bright and orange and yellow and saturated. Just something really, really subtle. Now another color that we can now introduce in the same fashion is this blue. So it's the middle of that second row. And then on the top edge of some of your clouds, you can just start to introduce some blue. Now it's kind of the opposite side to the orange. So you're kind of looking to introduce some of this bright blue on some of the top edges of some of your clouds. And it's like, it's environmental lighting. So it's how it's smudging, and the lighting is wrapping around the sky, and then it's landing onto the clouds, just showing, again, a little bit of environmental lighting. We can introduce a little bit in there. You can get a bit rogue and add in the odd one in a gap here and there, or maybe even a bit of blue up here, for example, and really separate that out. Here, where we've got like a large shapes, maybe you could add in like a little bit here and there. You don't want to add in too much. It's almost like a gap in the cloud, letting through a bit of the sky. It's not that we're painting in sky, we're bringing in some of the environmental lighting in here. I'm going to try and be a bit brave and chuck some on the top edges of some of these clouds. That cloud there needs a bit of attention. I think I can grab my smudge tool and start to smudge all that together a bit more. But this one definitely needs a bit of love. I might fix it afterwards. It's perfectly fine for now, but we'll have a look at it later on. It's looking a little bit better. I think I might have to just reinvent the shape a tiny bit and break it down, separate it, create a bit more of an interesting look to it, and maybe even like I said, completely separate this. I'm somewhat leaving this in for a moment because I want you to be able to see what I'm seeing, and then maybe even have to make some corrections yourself with your own work. That looks a lot better. It's a bit more unique. Again, I'm going to push some of those dark tones up towards where the blue is, just to give me a little bit of that blue edging on some of the edge of the clouds. That'll give you a beautiful, beautiful effect, and some interesting, again, environmental lighting. Excellent. Love that. Now at this point, we're going to get a little bit rogue in a sense, where we're going to introduce some angles here and distort. So we're going to go up to our tools and we're going to go to transform, and so under edit, transform, distort, drag out that top right node, drag out the top left node as well, and then just move that around if you can. You should be able to just move it around. Move that top node up a tiny bit. We're trying to stretch out the sky and give it a real angular look to it. You can keep it a little bit like this. It depends. You don't have to do this necessarily if you're really happy with your sky. Again, I did this in my practices and it looked really good. I'm fairly happy with my sky as it is, but it's not dramatic enough for me. This cloud at the top here could be a lot more interesting, and likewise the one on the right hand side too. So for me, I think that looks a little bit more interesting, but sometimes that's up to you if you want to do it or not. You don't always have to listen to me. You don't have to at all. Let's go ahead and try and squeeze this in a bit more, see what other angle we can start to bring in. I think that looks pretty cool with that top cloud getting nice and sort of brought in, and then this one still exists as well. And just keep messing around until you're happy. So for me, I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to hit the tick when I'm done. Now at this point, we can also start to introduce sort of variations in our layers that then show up underneath, and to just fill out the sky a little bit more. So we're going to go ahead and tap on our clouds and duplicate them. The one underneath, tap on it and bring its opacity down to around about sort of 35%, something like that. Then go to your tools, go to edit, basic transform, and just scale it up in size. And then just move it a little bit sort of down and maybe off to the left down here. What we're looking to do is we're looking to kind of fill the gaps almost between our clouds. You can see the clouds moving around in between. We're trying to add in some additional kind of detail here. So potentially we could bring that down and maybe even scale that up and just see what we can come up with by just moving it down and a little bit off to the side and just filling in a bit more detail. If you hit the tick now, you've got all of these sort of elements in the background just filling in the whole sky. Now we're not necessarily done either, because we can go to our clouds at the top again. We can tap on them and we can duplicate them. We can go to the one underneath, tap on it again and change its blend mode from normal to the option of soft light. And again, we can then go ahead and start to move this around. So we can grab our tools, we can go to edit, basic transformation again, scale it up in size if you want to. You can make it really, really large and bring it down, or even just move it across your sky like so. You're going to get all these amazing tones in the rest of your sky, and you will get some sort of outlining. That's fine, and it will add some extra sort of detail, I think, to the design. But you can always go ahead and erase it. That's the most important thing. So if you don't like it, you can always tone it down. So I think if I move mine up and to the right hand side, I can bring some of these clouds down and add in like little elements here and there in the sky. So I'm going to hit the tick when I'm done, and I've got some fantastic full sky. And to me, this just comes to life at that point. But where it really comes to life is now where we add in the brightest tone. So making sure you're on your main clouds up here. We want to go ahead and make sure we're back on our brush. Our opacity and flow wants to come back up. We want to go ahead and change our color. We want to go ahead and grab this color here, the second color in the palette, nice and bright. We're going to make sure our brush is set to something very, very small. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to zoom in. I'm going to zoom in on some clouds, and we are going to start to finalize our details. So you may even want to go even smaller than that, maybe down to like an 8 or a 9 or something like that. This is the part of the design where you can really, really get lost in time and detail. Scribbling along here, wiggling. Now, always help Infinite Painter by going up to the 3 dots and hitting save. That just allows it to catch up a little bit, and then we can carry on with our work, knowing that it's hopefully going to prevent like a crash or anything like that. So what we're looking for now is we're looking for the underside of some of our kind of yellowy tones here. You don't have to do everywhere. You know, just like little dashes and dots or little random wiggles here and there will look great. But we're trying to introduce round shapes over and over and over again. Tons and tons if you can. You know, really wiggle your pen in there, scribble in the color. Adding in some lovely cloudy effects. Zoom all the way out. Look at the difference between that cloud now and this cloud. That is so sharp. It's so precise. We know exactly what's going on because we've added in all of those lovely squiggles and wiggles. And you can add them up and down in certain shapes and certain areas. You know, really wiggle them around. See what you like the look of. Always zoom out. Crush all that detail down. Move across. Let's then go ahead and sort of, let's try and maybe round off this object here and wiggle that along, create like a bit of a drag on that one too, and another drag here. I don't know what that flash was there, but we've introduced another one there. We can go ahead and go over here, a couple of wiggles along there, and then we'll add some more onto here. This one's going to get loads and loads of wiggles and squiggles in here because we've got a lovely big cloud here that we can detail and detail and detail. So again, I've allowed you to sort of go through that process with me and sort of build up that entire journey, the blueprint of your cloud. And then when you get to this stage now, you're starting to see all of it come together. You're starting to see all of the design and the shapes that you created in your work and how you can now detail them and expose them and really heighten them by introducing all these lovely bright squiggles and wiggles. Again, just like we've done at every single stage pretty much, you can grab that smudge tool and you can have as much fun as you like. They look great. Grab the smudge tool, tap on it, make sure we set the size of it to something really, really small, something around about 8 or 9. Get in behind these lines and wisp them up. In fact, let's go a bit bigger. Let's go up to around about sort of 16 maybe. And let's wisp up some of these here, really wisp them up, rounding them up a tiny bit. You know, take down some of these kind of brush stroke effects almost by just wiggling your pen in there. Look at that, beautiful. Up here I've got quite a lot of brush stroke kind of aesthetic to it, which I don't hate. I actually quite like it. You end up with some lovely smudged areas as well, but leave certain areas nice and crispy. Zoom out, look beautiful. It's fun. It's just a bit sort of artistic, really. You know, you don't need to sort of depict clouds sometimes too much and too seriously against sort of real life. You can create whatever sky. Sometimes you look up and you see a sky that's, you know, just so pretty and beautiful to look at. And you think, wow, why don't they look like that all the time? And that's what you're doing now. You're designing a sky that you're seeing at this one sunset or one time of year or whatever it may be. And you're coming up with the story, first of all, which gives you license to do whatever you want. And it's just interesting to look at. So you don't always have to replicate boring blue clouds, etc. You can have some fun with it. Smudging out a few of those lines. Again, I'm going to spend as long as I can on this. So we're going to go back to our brush. We're going to see what other areas we can identify. Maybe I can identify like a little bit of an area here. Maybe a little wiggle or two along there too. A couple of dashes, again, like little random little curls, little something like that. It's just something, a little area of cloud that's just saying, hello, I'm getting a little bit of lighting. Make sure you take a look at me too. little bit up on there. Up here, we're definitely going to have some fun with this big cloud here. Oh yeah, we're going to have some fun with this one. Couple of wiggles around there, couple of squiggles along the edge, couple of more random little ones here, you know, bulk them together at certain points. Back here, don't have to do the entirety of the line, but just a little bit on there. Lovely. Let's add in some, I'll undo that one. Couple on that one will look good. So you can like make lines somewhat like parallel to each other, which look great. Just wiggle your pen a couple of times back over yourself. That's just, sometimes it's really not that deep almost, is it? It's like, it's simple. It's just a couple of squiggles, a couple of smudges. No one knew it was just intended to be a squiggle. No one knew that when you were drawing it. You just drew it in, smudged it together in a moment, and then that created these beautiful crispy clouds. Back here, you can also add some back here, right at the very sort of sideline edge of our design. Let's maybe introduce like a tiny bright spot on that dark area of that cloud, and maybe a tiny bit underneath there too. Maybe the odd random stray tiny bit of lighting. Nothing too much on those ones that are super far in the distance. Here, really urge you to have some fun with the big cloud up here, you know, really introduce some interesting rounded shapes and put layers of color in there like I've just done there. Awesome. Again, you can spend so long. You can spend so long on a design like this. I love it though. It's the type of one that I'll even come away from a tutorial recording and I'll easily spend another hour or two just detailing. I think a lot of tutors do that as well, because we can't put it down, and that's what I was saying right at the sort of midpoint of this design. You know, step away from it. So I'm smudging at this point. Same thing we've all done together at this point. Smudging into the gaps. Smudging into the gaps. Seeing what we can blend out of some of these lines. Seeing what we can just blend together. You know, you don't have to necessarily destroy it too much. Oh, lovely. Now this is somewhat the second to last layer of color, because there is the option in a minute to add in a linear dodge layer, which we can do together, where we can introduce some brighter tone onto our clouds even more, but it's basically white at that point. You see these ones in the distance? I'm smudging the darkness towards the line and also then smudging out the line, because I don't want that to have too much lighting over there. But look how dynamic that's now looking. Lovely. We've got so many little squiggles and wiggles in here to blend together. Lovely. And you'll start to pick up your pace. And I urge you to try, by the way, I'm jumping back to my pen now. I urge you to try this multiple times and draw in, sort of follow the same foundations, dark tones into light tones, into your final fine tones of your lighting. You know, I urge you to try multiple times to try and create new clouds and new skies, and or even reuse the palette if you want to and just create a new version. A different angle, maybe a different sort of setup, or a completely different layout of your clouds in general will look great. Now those ones back there, they look a little bit too uniform. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to break down all the uniformed kind of aesthetic to these ones. So I'm going to smudge them out quite a bit, blur them right down. That looks pretty good actually. I like that. I like the variation in them. They look cool. And taking a look at that one's pretty much done. So these ones down here, I haven't introduced too much smudging on all of these. So I can get rid of some of those bright lines for a minute and then maybe reintroduce them as well. Lovely. Let's keep breaking down. The smudge tool, I think, is really satisfying because you start to see all of those lines just sort of blend into the rest of your painting. Let's get back to our brush again. Let's go ahead and maybe introduce like a stray little random line of cloud, just like here, maybe even another one, just like here, which is simply just like a light tone only. And look a little bit on there too. Random little break-offs, they look great. And then I think I want to keep detailing these two now a little bit more, you know, rounding shapes. Really, I want to show off some interesting highlight on here. Really, really interesting, and really kind of go for it. Show lots of little dashes and scrapes in here. Like it's one of the most detailed ones, because we're kind of telling people, don't look up there, look down here. This is where our bright tones are. This is where we're going to lure your attention to. That's typically always what will happen. I'll switch back to the smudge. As you introduce sort of brighter tones, that's mainly where people's attention will start to focus, and that's what you can use to your advantage. So put those darker tones sometimes on the edge of your design, and put the brighter tones where you want people to look. Of course, if it's a nighttime scene, it's completely different, but you know, the same principles somewhat apply. You know, you can still put the light source where you want people to look more so. I'm going to wiggle along there a little bit more, introducing some extra detail. I'm really trying to get some random curves and dips and dashes and all sorts of stuff. All those other words that you can think of for just then purposeful smudging in there and creating some beautiful, brightly lit clouds as well. Zooming out. Oh, really, really happy with that. Really, really happy. Now you can, as I mentioned, create a new layer. You can go ahead and tap on this layer and change it from normal to the option of linear dodge. And then once you're set to linear dodge, you're on a separate layer now. You can go ahead and draw in again, and it's pretty much, you see that? It's pretty much going to go to white. So what you can do is you can go back to your brush. You can go along some of these edges and you can introduce what's basically white now. So you're on a separate layer, so you're not going to somewhat interfere with the layer underneath, but you can get in there now and create additional tones of brighter tone. You know, we're really, really bright at this point. These are the clouds really enjoying getting absolutely bathed in the sunlight. So you want to pick where that goes. The majority of it will be over here on this right hand side of our design, especially if you followed suit with me in terms of the general aesthetic. You don't want to add any of these up here. It's just in this area here. Now, one thing you'll notice, if I go ahead and try to smudge this linear dodge, watch what happens. It just goes like this. And that's because if you go to settings, it's sampling lower layers as well. So what we want to do is we want to turn that off. So now it only looks at the layer we're working on, and now you can smudge that linear dodge, big bright glow underneath some of your clouds there. So like here, I've got a massive big area of white glowy color, which I think looks fantastic. And now that's been smudged out a little bit more. And if we go ahead and we take a look at our design, are we happy with it? I think we are. The only thing you could also go ahead and do is you could go ahead and sort of add in some extra layer effects on the very top. So if you were done with your design, you could go ahead and pinch it all together. What you could do otherwise is go ahead and go to the option of, we want to select the design. So we're going to go up to our tools. We're going to go ahead and go to select and rectangle. We're going to zoom out. We're going to go ahead and copy merged. And that's going to paste your entire layer at the very top here and hit the tick when you're done. So you've got your entire layer there, which means you can save your other layers underneath. And then if you want to, you can make adjustments. So you could go ahead and we can bring that out. We can go ahead and we can take a look at this option here. We can tap on it here and we can go ahead and see if there's some extra sort of tones in here we want to adjust. So maybe it's gamma. If we tap on gamma, we can go ahead and adjust the setting of that, maybe make it a little bit darker, bringing that down to make this left-hand side a bit more dramatic. Maybe bringing it down to say 13. If we go ahead and we tap here to create a new tool, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the saturation options. So under saturation, we can go ahead and really, make it nice and golden, but you don't want to make it too crazy. And you could even go the opposite way if you want to make it a little bit more dull. And when you're done with today's design, you can go ahead and pinch with 2 fingers most of the time to go full screen, and you can then tap with 4 fingers and you're done with today's design. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial on painting some sky in Infinite Painter, and I've been using my XP Pen Magic drawing pad, which is part of my review process at the minute. I'm using it to form my review, so keep an eye out on the channel in case that's already out. If it is, I'll leave a link at the end of the video. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit through this painting design today. As always, make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram, Facebook, anywhere you decide to share your work. And if you didn't know, you can now support the work that I do here on the channel by becoming a member of the channel. You can go ahead and hit the join button down below and you get early access to these tutorials as well. So make sure to check that out using the link in the description down below. And again, if you're interested, I'll leave a link to the XP pen in the description down below. So thank you so much for watching today's video. And if you like this video here on YouTube, you'll love this one on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.